Welcome back to Smart Life. With the recent shootings in Santa Barbara, California, the debate over gun control is, of course, back in the news. It's easy to have an emotional response, but we should really be looking at what actually works, not what feels good. Matt Gumersell is the owner and senior firearms instructor at Sovereign Arms in St. Louis, Missouri, my old stomping grounds. He trains people to do what really works, and that is to defend themselves. Matt, welcome to Smart Life. Thanks for coming on today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me, and respect you and appreciate your show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wrote a big post on this whole topic that I think mental health is the worst thing that could possibly happen if we hand over a bunch more money to an industry already completely in chaos. You can read my column this week. Can't remember the title of it, but it's right there at WND.com, right at the top, in my opinion column. And if we pass the buck on I guess the accusations coming out of the statists that want to ban guns and want to take away our Second Amendment right, if we pass the buck on to mental health, we could be in even more trouble. So for us, Matt, what is the answer? They say it's more gun control. I'm saying it's definitely not the mental health industry. What are the answers?
Well, I would agree that there certainly are issues concerning mental health that are very legitimate, and I think that those things can't be overlooked. They are serious and legitimate concerns, and they need to be addressed, I think, in the proper venue through a licensed mental health professional that can actually determine whether or not somebody has a legitimate issue and should not be in possession of a firearm. I do agree with that.
Hold on, Matt. I can't let that go because this is too important to me.
Sure.
Only 4% of those who commit violent acts are ever even diagnosed with a mental illness. So you're talking about 4% of the population, but when you talk about who they're going to take the rights away from, we're talking about 50% of the population is now diagnosable under the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual, the DSM-5. 50% of the American population will not be allowed to own guns. And that number is only going to go up as the labeling happens under the Affordable Health Care Act under Obamacare. And worse than that, about 90% of our military who have served us come back with some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder. Guess what? They're not going to be able to have guns either. We cannot buy into this line that some professional who's trained in ivory towers, who is probably a statist themselves, who probably teaches statism in their classroom, should be the one who gets to decide who and who doesn't have a Second Amendment right, Matt. We have to be very careful about how we define that.
Yes, ma'am. And I do agree with you 100%. My statement was just to say that I think there are some issues, certainly, whether it's only 4%, that there are legitimate times where that could be a concern. But I do agree with your 100% with what you just stated. My personal feeling, and we've been working on this actually for years, trying to put protectors in schools, trying to do away with gun-free zones. After the CT shooting, we actually were the only gun store in Missouri that trained Missouri educators 100% for free. We actually trained over 200 Missouri educators for free after that happened. We are still dedicated to putting protectors in schools, training people, working with legislation with the Missouri Senate and House to try to have an alternative to gun-free zones, to give jobs to men and women coming back from serving our country that in their heart are called to be protectors and would have an amazing opportunity to use the gifts and the talents that they've been blessed with to do that very thing and go into our schools and protect our teachers and our children. Our desire last year was actually to start like a huge shooting university where we would actually train protectors to the level that would exceed post curriculum, which is what the police officers go through, that could be insurable, recognizable on a state level, and give people a chance to do the things that they're called to do and be in the schools protecting our kids and our teachers in schools.
Yeah, you make a good point because if you look at Israel, for example, Israel's a great example of how to do away with the TSA for one thing, but also you can look at the Israeli example of schools. In 1970, they instituted a program where teachers and administrators were trained in the use of firearms. Now, no one mandatorily has to carry a gun, and I think that's what goes through teachers' minds. Oh, I don't want to have to carry a gun. Fine, you don't have to, but there has to be a certain percentage of the administration and the people present in the school that do. It can't be a gun-free zone. In Israel, since 1970, not one death of one child in a school. Why? Because they don't have gun-free zones, and because they do have guns in schools, and because those who want to shoot up a school know they're going to be stopped fast. Second example, of course, is Switzerland. I wrote about this in my post as well this week. Children as young as 12 belong to gun clubs. People are trained from day one to use guns. This comes from when they were invaded by Nazi Germany, and they weren't, because they had so many guns and they were all trained, and they've just learned a citizen's responsibility, much like you're talking about, of knowing how to use a firearm. And those that aren't comfortable don't have to. No one has to, but those who are comfortable can be trained. In Switzerland, very much like in Israel, they don't have the gun violence we have, despite the fact that they have more guns per person and more freedom and access to guns than many states in the United States. And another interesting thing about Switzerland is that they've only had one major mass murder in recent history. We can't even count ours. They've had one, and it took place, guess where? You said it, in a gun-free zone. So what are the practical arguments we can give to people on the street who aren't going to look at all the gun data that you and I look at?
Sure.
They're not going to see women stand and shoot for the first time and be many times more accurate than men right off the bat, because there's something about women that they're just good aim right off the bat. They're not going to see all this. They're not going to know all this. What can we say to those people to convince them what really does work in saving lives?
Sure. Well, ma'am, I think that certainly people would agree that if you had a uniformed police officer at a school, standing in front of the school or in classrooms, that would be a huge deterrent to somebody that would want to try to bring harm to people in that school. The harder the target is, generally predatory people will always look for a simpler target. And we do executive protection and bodyguarding all over the world. We actually train with the Israeli counterterrorism training, and that's some of the training that we do and implement in our training for teachers in schools. And I don't think that people would argue that if you had uniformed police officers in a school, that they would really even have a problem with that. They would probably think they would be safer. Our goal and what we would like to see is to be able to train civilians, men and women returning that have served in our armed forces, to a level that actually exceeds the post-training that, again, would be recognizable by the state, could be insurable, could be licensed, could be bonded, and would be even above the level of most post-training, and would give people jobs. And I think that would make people feel comfortable and much more safer in that environment. It would allow teachers to do their jobs and what they're called to do, and give a chance for those that feel in their heart that they're called to protect to do that very thing.
I like all that, and I think it sounds so sensible. I think what we have to do is we have to ask people, even though these issues are so insanely emotional, we have to ask people to pull the emotion out and look at the data and the statistics and what actually does work. And I know that's what you're doing there, Matt, at Sovereign Arms. Thank you so much for being with us. How can people find you?
They can go on our website to www.sovereignarms.com. And that's probably the easiest way to find us. And thank you, ma'am. I respect you very much and appreciate what you're doing. And thank you for allowing us to be on your show.
Thank you so much, Matt. Check him out.